Peace, love, liberty, radio.
And the walls come crashing down as the war at home reaches your town. You have no choice, it's safe and clean. We all submit to the war machine.
You know what day today is? It's the day that I answer your questions. And something else that I like to do when I'm not answering your questions on the Wednesday edition of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, I like to give updates on various things. And I've got an update on a story that I covered a couple of weeks ago about the non-compliant states with the Real ID. Well, the Department of Homeland Security came out with an update last week. Came out on Friday after I did the show last Friday, so I didn't get to cover the story then, but I will cover the story today because I forgot to cover the story on Monday. And then I also have a update, and it's something that I like to report on. It's not something that I like, but it's something that I like to report on. I've got an update from the U.S. Supreme Court regarding the death penalty and the implementation thereof. But first, I want to get into your questions. The only question this week comes via Twitter, and the question is, what are your thoughts on Gary Johnson? And I have to say that I recall being told as a child, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. But I was asked my opinion, so I will give it. I think that Gary Johnson is a mighty fine Republican. If he were running for the Republican presidential nomination, he would probably be the least horrible person doing so. However, Gary Johnson is not running for the Republican Party's presidential nomination. Gary Johnson is running for the Libertarian Party's nomination. And I have to say that on the day that Gary Johnson announced that he was running, he said some things that were very un-libertarian. And the day after, because he wound up getting a lot of backlash for things that he said the day after, he kind of tried to walk it back a little and said, quote, "If I'm wrong, but he did not say I'm wrong, that my position is wrong. He sort of walked around it and said that it was a knee-jerk response, but if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Well, That's not an apology, and that's not saying that I don't believe the things that I said. But I digress. Let me sort of expand the question here. Instead of my thoughts on Gary Johnson, I guess expand is not the right term. I'll focus a little bit on the answer, and I'll modify the question to be, what are my thoughts on Gary Johnson seeking the Libertarian Party's presidential nomination? And I would say that I don't think that Gary Johnson or any of the celebrity candidates, if you will, that are seeking the Libertarian Party's presidential nomination are a good thing for the Libertarian Party. I think that there are definitely people within the Libertarian Party that care more about flash and less about substance. They're all about the sizzle. They're not about the steak, if you will. And I realize that, that's basically throwing out catchphrases, but you should get the point. There are people that they care more about style than substance. They want the support to be a mile wide but an inch deep. I would rather have a libertarian candidate that has substance that goes down a mile but support that's only 1 inch wide than vice versa. Because if you aren't grounded in principle, if your basis of libertarianism is just, well, it sounds good, but you aren't grounded in the principle, and that principle is the principle of non-aggression, that you do not initiate force because force is wrong. You do not commit fraud because fraud is wrong. That everybody is completely equal. Everybody has the same rights as human beings. And that means that no one has the right to initiate force or fraud for any purpose. It also means that no one can delegate the initiation thereof. So I can't take your stuff. I can't delegate the taking of your stuff. But there are several of the candidates that are running that they still want to delegate the taking of stuff. They just want to be nicer about it and more transparent. So there's the fair tax proposal that is something that in 2012 Gary Johnson was an advocate of, that it would not abolish taxation. It would just make the taxation a little more transparent, kind of, maybe. And it would wind up imposing a national sales tax, which means that people like myself that live in a state that has no sales tax, it would then impose something on me that I don't currently have. For people that live in states with the sales tax already, it would just raise whatever sales tax they're paying, and it would be a complete nightmare. It would be a bureaucratic nightmare to carry out, because there would be checks being sent out every month to people based on an amount of money that they're expected to pay on taxes in the coming month. And a lot of people would just look at that as, hey, free money, and not realizing that, well, no, this is money that's supposed to cover an amount of tax, and it's not a rebate, it's not a prebate. It's just an amount of money that's based on, this is what we think you will pay on taxes for sales tax in the coming month. There are ways people can avoid paying those taxes and basically wind up with free money. There are people that would wind up paying a lot more than what they get in that check. So it's basically a national welfare program by another name, and the form of taxation is modified, but there's still theft. Now, I am wanting to completely eliminate the theft. I have one of the first articles that I put on my campaign website, DarrylWperry.com, is how to fund government without taxation. How do you fund things voluntarily? And that's what I'm promoting. I'm promoting actual libertarian positions. The principle of non-aggression. Promoting peace, not promoting, well, I would like these wars to end or maybe be legal. No, that I don't care if some group of people passed a thing saying, yes, this law or this war is legal. No, it's still immoral to kill people. It doesn't matter if you have the vote of 218 people in Congress saying, yep, it's legal. It might be legal, but it's still immoral. And that's not anything that you're seeing from any of the celebrity candidates, including Gary Johnson, Austin Peterson, and John McAfee. What you're seeing is a lot of style, not a lot of substance. And again, I think that Gary Johnson would be a fine Republican. I still wouldn't vote for the guy, but I think he would be a mighty fine Republican presidential nominee. I think Austin Peterson also would be a mighty fine Republican presidential nominee. And John McAfee, I think he would be a good nominee for somebody other than the Libertarian Party. Heck, he had the Cyber Party, but realized how expensive ballot access was and jumped in the LP race. There's a little bit more on this. Stay tuned.
When her plush and comfy life suddenly and unexpectedly fell apart, Brooke and her dog Cloud set out to defy the odds. If this is a man's world, as they say, living on the streets is no place for a young woman. One day she awoke in the redwood forest and realized she had become a hobo, and would ultimately come to know exactly what it means to survive. How to Be a Hobo by Brooke Willett is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
Hey, this is Michael Dean from the Freedom Fiends radio show. I've been working with computer programmer Derek Slopey to create Fiend Phone. I'm using Fiend Phone right now to talk with and record one of my co-hosts in real time. Take it, Davi.
Hey, this is Davi Barker, and I'm 1,000 miles away from Michael, but we sound like we're in the same room.
We sure do, Davi. So, Davi, please tell the nice people more about Fiend Phone.
FiendPhone is free, open-source software that opens up a global world of possibilities for collaborative, high-quality remote voice media production, and I'm digging it.
People can try the Windows beta version of FiendPhone right now at fiendphone.com. But we're also raising money to vastly improve FiendPhone and vastly improve independent talk media worldwide.
So go to fiendphone.com to help out. Who will build the audio roads? We will, with your help.
That's fiendphone.com. FEENPHONE.com. Foxtrot, Echo, November, phone.com.
FiendPhone. I never knew remote audio could be this good.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
So I definitely want to talk just a little bit more on the election, specifically the Libertarian Party presidential nomination process that will be happening coming up in the coming months. The actual nominations happen at the convention, the national convention in Orlando that happens Memorial Day weekend, and it's going to be at the Rosen Center, I believe is the name of the hotel conference center down there in Orlando. But before then, now with the Republicans and Democrats, there's these primaries, and delegates get allotted at the primaries, and some of those delegates are binding, some of those delegates are not binding. But you don't really have that with the Libertarians. What you have, and that there are a few states that have primaries for the Libertarian Party, but they're not binding. One of the states that has a primary is going to be North Carolina. That primary is the same day as the Republican and Democratic primary in North Carolina, which would be March 15th. And there's actually going to be a pre-primary debate happening on March 8th. And the Libertarian Party of North Carolina has taken to the internet to try to figure out which candidates they're going to invite to the debate instead of having all 12 people that have announced, or I think there's more than 12 that have announced, but there's 12 that are on the primary ballot in North Carolina. So instead of having all 12 of those people in the debate, they've got a poll online, and they'll be taking the top 5 people from that poll. I'll post the link to the poll in the show notes. Please, when you get a moment, vote for your favorite candidate. Unfortunately, you can only vote for one candidate. It's not which 5 people would you like to see in the debate. It's, vote on the candidate that you support. So, again, I'll post that in the show notes, and hopefully you will vote on that. But there's that, and that primary, again, it's not binding. There are a few other states that have primaries, again, not binding. Although some states at their state convention will hold caucuses, and then they'll, bind maybe 1 or 2 of the delegates. And there's actually a straw poll coming up this Saturday in New Hampshire at the New Hampshire Libertarian Party State Convention, and that straw poll will wind up allotting 1 delegate to the winner of that poll, and I'm not sure which of the 10 delegates will be the one that says, yes, I'm casting this sworn vote or this allotted vote. But that, I guess, will be determined at convention. So I'll have results on Monday of that straw poll that happens this weekend. So I'm done answering your questions, and now in just a moment I will jump into giving some of the updates on some of the news stories that I've covered. And the ones that I aforementioned that I would be giving updates on. But before I jump into that, there is one other thing that I need to tell you about, and that is Roberts & Roberts Brokerage. Since 1977, Roberts & Roberts has been a trusted source for buying and selling precious metals like gold and silver. They also take Bitcoin for precious metal purchases and have permanently removed the minimum purchase amount for all orders paid in the digital currency. Call Roberts & Roberts Brokerage today for knowledgeable advice on buying and selling precious metals and a forward-thinking approach to new technologies. 800-874-9760. That's 800-874-9760. Or you can visit them online at rrbi.co. That's rrbi.co. Oh, and one more thing before I jump into the news about the Department of Homeland Security. There's a convention coming up at the end of February. It will be the weekend of February 27th, 28th in Biloxi, Mississippi. It's a joint Alabama-Mississippi Libertarian Party state convention. There will be a presidential debate there. I don't know if they're going to be having any kind of straw poll to, show levels of support that various candidates have, but they will have a presidential debate. And if you are anywhere in the southeastern United States of America, then I'm sure they would sell you a ticket so that you could attend. Again, that's the weekend of February 27th and 28th, Biloxi, Mississippi, at the Beau Rivage there in Biloxi. And then there's going to be several other state conventions that happen between late February and Memorial Day weekend when the national convention takes place. And I'll be attending some of those. I've definitely confirmed for the main convention. I believe that is May 14th. There are others that I would love to attend, but I need campaign funds in order to be able to do so. So if you want to donate to the campaign, help me travel around to various state conventions and spread the message of peace, freedom, love, and liberty, you can head over to my campaign website, DarrylWPerry.com, and please make donations. So as of right now, I've already purchased my ticket, as far as my plane ticket down to Orlando for that national convention. So I really only need funds to get to state conventions. And when I say only, it's not a small amount by any stretch of the imagination. I've calculated that it would take about $2,000 to wind up getting me to most of the state conventions that are happening leading up to the national convention. Anything that you can donate in either Bitcoin or precious metals is greatly appreciated and will be put to good use spreading the ideas of liberty. So now let me change gears, get out of campaign mode and get into journalist mode and give you the update here from the Department of Homeland Security. The story here from UPI reports that the Department of Homeland Security last Friday announced that the 5 states that have not yet complied with the 10-year-old Real ID Act, and they don't actually say that, they talk a little bit about what it is and claims that it's intended to bolster national security. It's not. That's complete BS. What it's intended to do is create a national ID, a national database of various driver's licenses, and it's an unfunded mandate onto state governments. And luckily, a lot of states are not fully compliant. But there are 5 states right now, plus American Samoa, that are deemed non-compliant. And, well, the Department of Homeland Security has given a reprieve. DHS Secretary Jay Johnson said last Friday that complying with the department's Real ID law is critical to U.S. security in that it makes obtaining a phony state-issued driver's license more difficult for potential criminals. To date, 23 states, only 23 states and territories are fully compliant with Real ID. And I'll tell you more about the states that are not compliant and what this announcement from Homeland Security actually means for you, possibly.
The Doublespeak Dictionary by Leslie Starr O'Hara satirizes the marked difference between the ideal of we the people and the reality of we the elite, while offering an insightful glimpse into the clockworks of the totalitarian mind. Ever irreverent, but never irrelevant, the Doublespeak Dictionary serves as a subversive and humorous, but timely reminder that the emperor has no clothes. The Doublespeak Dictionary is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at weusecoins.com. That's weusecoins.com.
It is the year 91,001 BCE. Witness humanity's origins in Hyperchronius, a classic role-playing game for Windows PCs with a story like no other game before. A liberty-oriented experience that is not to be missed. Go to zog.ninja to get your copy of Hyperchronius today. Use the code FPP to get $1 off. Hyperchronius, zog.ninja, code FPP.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
To date, according to UPI, only 23 states and territories are fully compliant with Real ID. 24 states and territories have made enough progress to earn additional time to comply, meaning that they've been given extensions. 3 territories are being reviewed for an extension. 6 states and territories are non-compliant. Illinois, Minnesota, Missouri, New Mexico, and Washington are non-compliant, as is American Samoa. But American Samoa, as far as I am aware, can never be compliant with Real ID because people that live in American Samoa are not American citizens, and one of the things to have a driver's license or ID be compliant with Real ID is that only an American citizen can get the identification card. There's more from this that I definitely am going to jump into. But before I do that, I need to make sure that I tell you about one of my wonderful sponsors, the Lava Flow podcast. You're listening to this show, so I'm guessing you're upset or fed up, or you don't really like the idea of the government running every aspect of your life, right? Wait a second, you're not listening to the Lava Flow podcast yet? What in the world is wrong with you? Go right now to thelavaflow.com/listen. The Lava Flow podcast, channeling the flow of information to the libertarian, anarcho-capitalist, voluntarist, and agorist community. Subscribe today using any podcatcher. And yes, I finally downloaded a podcatcher. The podcatcher that I'm using on my HTC Desire 626S is Podcast Addict. And Podcast Addict makes it really easy to search for podcasts. There were a couple others that I tried when I was looking for, podcast catcher or, RSS podcast thing. There were some where you had to know what the RSS feed was. This, Podcast Addict, you type in the name of the show, and it will find it for you. It's super easy. You can even listen to the podcast faster than real time. So you can set it to, like 1.1, 1.2. I generally listen at either 1.2 or 1.5 speed, meaning that it's 1.5 times or 1.25 times as fast as normal. And that there are things that happen with the brain when you do that, like it's supposed to somehow stimulate certain parts of something in the brain and make you smarter. But I digress. So download a podcatcher on your phone. I use Podcast Addict. They're not paying me to mention them. I'm just telling you the one that I use. It's the one that out of several that I downloaded, it's the one that I like. So Podcast Addict or any other podcatcher, just subscribe. thelavaflow.com/listen. or just search for The Lava Flow if you've got a good podcatcher, and it will find it. Subscribe, thelavaflow.com/listen, or just go back to sucking up to the government. The Lava Flow, striking the root every episode. So jumping back now into the story here from UPI on the Department of Homeland Security's announcement about non-Real ID compliant states. One pinch, according to UPI, for residents of the non-compliant states is that they would need to present a different form of government identification, such as a passport to board a domestic flight. Not true at all. I'm fairly certain I've covered this on a previous episode, but the TSA still has a procedure. If you do not have an identification, they have procedures that allow you to get on board the flight. It involves basically interrogation by a TSA officer and then the extra special pat down to where they get to know you really, really well. But it will make it more difficult if you just have a driver's license from a non-compliant state. But if you don't want this extra interrogation and the extra love, then yes, you would need a passport or something akin to a passport. There are other government ID things that you can get from the federal government, but a passport is probably the easiest to get. Some had feared that the change would take effect this year, but the announcement last Friday means travelers in those states will be able to use their driver's license to board flights until at least January 22nd, 2018. Beginning October 1st, 2020, as of right now, the DHS says that all travelers must possess fully Real ID compliant ID to board a domestic flight. Again, that would mean that policies would wind up having to change over the next 4.5 years or so for that to actually be the case. But again, as of right now, if you live in a state that's not Real ID compliant, then you have until at least January 22nd of 2018. And again, they could wind up pushing this thing off again because they've been doing it over the last decade, where they initially said it'll take effect in 2008 and then 2010 and then like 2012 or 2013 and 2015, and now they're saying 2018. So I'll post the full story from UPI in the show notes. You can read it at your leisure. In the remaining moments here, I do want to tell you about this Supreme Court case out of Washington, D.C., dealing specifically with death penalty sentencing in Florida. The court, in an 8-1 decision, ruled that Florida's death sentence or death penalty sentencing process violates the constitutional right to criminal defendants, or rather of criminal defendants, by granting judges powers that juries should wield. Again, the 8-1 decision means that death row inmate Timothy Hurst could be resentenced for the 1998 murder of Cynthia Harrison in Pensacola, potentially avoiding capital punishment. The case now returns to the Florida Supreme Court to determine whether Hurst's death sentence can be upheld on other grounds. Sonia Sotomayor, writing on behalf of the court, said the right to an impartial jury guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution's Sixth Amendment required Florida to base Hurst's death sentence on a jury's verdict, not a judge's fact-finding. Samuel Alito was the sole dissenter in the case. In the case of Mr. Hurst, a jury, by a 7-5 vote, recommended to the judge that Hurst be executed, but did not specify what aggravating factors it had found. The judge then did independent investigation outside of what the jury had concluded and found that 2 aggravating factors applied: that Hurst committed the murder while committing a robbery, and that the crime was particularly heinous. The court did not touch the bigger and more divisive question of the constitutionality of the death sentence. And now here's some information on Hurst and what happened in 1998. Hurst is described by his lawyers as being mentally disabled with borderline intelligence and an IQ between 70 and 78. Hopefully, at some point in the future, the death penalty is completely ruled unconstitutional. Hey, we're out of time. This is Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Full story here of the case out of the Supreme Court will be in the show notes. Tune in again Monday, Wednesday, Friday at libertyradio.com.